Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Your mom.
Your mom who?
Your mom is dead, and so is your dad, 'cause I killed him with a fucking axe!
Anyways, grab a blanket, turn off your lights, for 3 true scariest knocks at your door. Knock at 3 a.m. This happened to me about 4 years ago. I was living with a roommate at an apartment complex in a bad area. It wasn't terrible exactly, but it was right by a busy road that seemed to attract a lot of crime, and it was surrounded by other crappy apartment complexes. The kind of place you, as a woman, wouldn't want to walk around in at night. I had been harassed every time. This was before I had a car. It was about 3 a.m. Roomie was dead asleep. I was awake, because who knows? I was in my room on the computer when I heard a knock at the door. It was literally just one knock, and I took off my headphones to make sure I'd heard correctly. After a few seconds of pause, another knock came. Then it began a rhythm. Not your normal someone at the door wanting to see you quick knock, but a slow, continuous one, almost like a singular heartbeat. Instantly I was alarmed, but I decided to just leave it alone, wait and see if maybe it was just some drunk who'd gotten confused and would toddle off after a bit. Literally minutes passed. The knocking did not stop, and it never picked up or slowed down, just a continued, slow, rhythmic knocking. After some time, I heard the person try for the doorknob in the middle of the knocking. We lived on the 3rd floor. Instantly, I was fearing for my life. Without waking my roomie, I went out into the living room and shouted through the door, "Who is it?" The knocking instantly stopped. I decided to look out to the peephole and see who it was. There was nobody there. I know it sounds like a horror movie, but I saw literally nothing. At that point, I backed away, and after I did, the knocking resumed. My shouting had woken my roomie, who was now asking what the hell was going on. I told her some person was knocking at the door like this over and over, and they must have hidden around the side of the wall when I went to look out the peephole. They were fucking with us. We called the police. They arrived after about 10 minutes, which consisted of me and my roomie hiding in our bathroom, which had a lock, fortunately, while this psycho kept doing that slow knock at the door. Once the cops showed up, we were safe to come out and look at who was doing this to us. It was a boy probably no older than 18. They had him restrained and had taken a backpack off of him. Inside the backpack was a shocking amount of drugs and, even worse, a knife. I'd never seen the kid before, but we were told he lived literally across the parking lot from us, in the exact same apartment complex. The kid wouldn't say what he was doing here, but the sight of the contents of that backpack sent deep chills throughout my body. I'm positive he was planning to use the drugs on us and rape and possibly kill us. The kid was arrested and jailed for a while, but after he got released, I heard he ran away. He'd been living with his dad at the apartments. I haven't heard anything about him since, but Ruby and I moved to a nicer area shortly after that incident. I seriously hope he gets locked up again for some minor crime, because it's clear that he had every intent to victimize us that night, and I have no doubt he tried again. I'll never forget the way he knocked at our door. It filled me with a sense of dread I've never felt in my life. Someone memorized the family knock. My friend Lily had a cabin on the lake in Washington, and one summer, she brought me and her cousin Evan. It had been a great couple of days, and on the last night, we went fishing at the lake, about a 5-minute walk from her cabin. It was about 7 p.m., and the fishing was perfect at that hour. To get to the beach, you had to walk through a small section of woods. There was a trail in the middle that during the day was occupied by women jogging with strollers and kids, running to another nearby beach. Our beach was more secluded, and there was no trail to get there. The hill down was steep and slippery, and on the way back, it took climbing on all fours to get to the top. We stayed at that beach until about 8:30, just sitting in the dark, relaxing. We were good kids, and mostly just sat on a log chatting. It was one of those weird situations where suddenly you look around, and you realize that it's gone dark. I told Lily and Evan that we should probably get home. They agreed, and we packed up our gear. This was the latest that we had stayed out at the beach, so to my overactive imagination and scary movie-powered imagination, I was a little scared. We calmly and silently, for some reason, walked up the hill. I told him that it was pretty creepy here at night, and then Evan made it 10 times worse. He told us a story about these mountain men who had been around in the 60s, and were basically these men who lived in the woods and were in some sort of a cult. He said they had murdered people all over the area for their cult, and that some of them were still around. Internally, I was hysterical and terrified, but externally, I basically told Evan to shut up and stop trying to scare us. As we started to cross the trail, Evan looked to our right for some reason. He stopped dead in his tracks and looked scared. Lily told him to stop being stupid, and the two of us started to climb the steepest part, on all fours, of the hill. Evan grabbed us both by the arm and very forcefully made us look where he was looking. At first, I couldn't see anything and I just wanted to get home, but then my eyes adjusted, and I saw a large man, I'm assuming it was a man because of the shape, stumbling towards us pretty slowly. Who knows what his intentions were, but being kids, we freaked out and scrambled up the hill as fast as we could. We all turned around at some point and saw that the dude was running while stumbling quicker towards us while we climbed. He got pretty close to us until we finally got over the hill and sprinted across the road to the cabin. It sounds fairly innocent, but we all had a deep feeling of dread when we saw him on that trail. It didn't feel like he had good intentions. Once we got to the cabin, we threw our gear on the porch and ran to the front door, and it was locked. There was a secret knock that her family had that showed the person at the door was a member of the family or a friend. It was a fairly complicated rhythm, and both Lily and Evan banged on the door to the family knock. I just looked around trying to see if the creep had followed us, but saw nothing. We were let in, and in a panic told the adults the whole story. They said it was probably just some guy who we probably made feel bad. We disagreed but felt safe in the log cabin with grown-ups. The cabin had a walkout basement, basically like a lower story, not a creepy basement. It had a door and windows, where Lily and I slept on bunk beds. We went down to get into pajamas. After about 5 minutes of calming down together, we heard the family knock. I thought it was Evan trying to come in from the stairway door, so I said, "Come in!" No response. It happened again, but this time, we realized where it was coming from. The window outside. Lily and I turned completely white and stared at each other with that horrible feeling of terror in your stomach. It happened again, but a little more frantically. We both ran to the stairway door and booked it up to the living room where Lily's family and Evan were. We told them all what we had heard through panicked tears, and Evan went downstairs to listen. He said it was definitely the knock. While Lily's uncle, older brother, and older cousin all gathered flashlights to go look outside, we heard it again, but on the front door. Everyone looked at the door and huddled together. It happened once or twice more, and Lily's uncle finally decided to call the cops. He said, "I'm not sure what their intentions are, but there was someone trying to get into our cabin." The knocking went on for another 2 minutes or so, and it finally stopped. 5 minutes after the call, the police showed up with a comforting loud pounding and "Police!" yelled through the door. To make sure, Lily's uncle looked outside a window and saw other police searching around for the creeper. The police asked us 3 kids what had happened in the woods, and we told them the whole thing. The police never found anyone, but those banging knocks on the door will stick with me forever. The police said it was probably just some guy who was twisted and wanted to freak some kids out. But what creeped me out the most was the fact that that person had memorized the complicated family knock. All 3 of us slept on the floor together. To the creepy man who really wanted to get into her cabin. Let's not meet. Knock, knock. I'm renting a studio apartment in the big city while I have an internship. It's in an old building with one other apartment, and we both share a hallway with a locked door to the outside world at the end of it. When I first got here, I arrived pretty late, so the landlord left a key for me in the letterbox and texted me the combination. The next day, when I came home from work, the key wouldn't work in the lock anymore. I was pretty puzzled, since it had worked perfectly before, so I called the locksmith to see if he could let me in. He told me the lock had failed, and that it would have to be replaced completely, including with a new key. It cost me $300 all the way up, but I was tired and hungry and glad to be back inside, and I thought I could show the receipt to the landlord and be reimbursed. Being the absent-minded person I am, every time I got home late from work, I would see the receipt on the table and think, that's right, I need to tell the landlord and give them the new key. But I never got around to it. Then, a few weeks ago, I was lying in bed watching TV on a low volume before I fell asleep. I was just starting to doze off when I heard a sound that jerked me awake. The sound of a key being inserted into my door. I immediately jerked up in bed and gathered the covers around me, going through the list of people in my head who it might be. Not my parents, they're 5 hours away, not a friend, no one knew of this address, and besides, how would they get into the secure hallway? Aside from me, the only person with a key was the landlord, and why the fuck would he let himself in unannounced at midnight, while I was sleeping in the nude? I sat there frozen, staring at the door in horror, and waiting for it to open, except it didn't. I changed the locks. As I sat there paralyzed with fear, that fact slowly sank in. I changed the fucking lock when I move in. They couldn't get in because the lock screwed up, and I was too flaky to tell anyone about it. I slipped out of bed and pulled on my work clothes, then kinda just stood there in the middle of the room with my phone in my hand waiting for them to leave. I was way too scared to breathe too loud or even turn off the TV, in case they realized someone was inside. My door doesn't have a peephole, but even if it did, I probably would have been too much of a coward to cross my room and stand that close to it. I felt like I was having a mini heart attack. The lock was audibly being manipulated at this point. Whoever was on the other side was loudly jiggling the key and shaking the knob, and I heard the door creak as though someone was leaning on it. I was still ready to crap my pants, but my mind bizarrely wandered to how I would tell my parents about this. I clearly imagined my mom saying, "Well, did you tell them to go away?" and making up an excuse that it was just someone lost or they got into the wrong apartment. It sounds ridiculous, but I needed to prove that I wasn't an irrational person. I needed to prove that this wasn't just some silly mistake I was blowing out of proportion. So I cleared my throat and let out a feeble, "Hello?" The shaking stopped immediately. This was almost as worse from the noise than before. Every muscle in my body tensed listening for a sound, and I quickly decided to turn off my TV since they already knew I was here. Then it was just me, the silence, and my mind working in overtime to try to explain who the hell this person was. Until they knocked on the door. I stood dead still in the middle of the room, but my stomach gave an involuntary jolt at the sound. He knocked again. A muffled voice came through the door and it creaked again, like someone was leaning on it. "Hey! Let me in!" This might be part of the horror movie where the dumb girl opens the door just to satisfy her curiosity, but every cell in my body simultaneously screamed, "Oh, hell no." I decided I would continue with my current plan to stand tense and frozen in the middle of the room, except I backed towards the kitchenette and grabbed the biggest knife I could find. In the absence of my response, knocks became a loud bang. First, it sounded like someone was insistently pounding their closed fist on the door, but soon the whole door frame and wall shook from the impact. I realized the person was throwing their body weight against it. At this point, I called the police. I can't even remember what I said to them. I was so filled with white-hot panic. I was later told I screamed, "Hurry, send everyone!" which is a bit embarrassing. I had trouble remembering my address, but luckily, it was still on the locksmith receipt, still sitting on the table. When I was talking to the operator, she said she could hear the guy trying to get in, and I should lock myself in the bathroom if I could. I guess he overheard me on the phone, because the banging abruptly stopped. Suddenly, I was in the jaw situation again, where the shark is gone, but you know it's just under the water. I held onto the knife so tightly that my nails made a mark in the palm of my hand where they wrapped around it, and I kept asking the operator, what if he comes back? Luckily, I didn't have to worry about that. Next people to knock on my door were the cops. They were able to get into the hallway because someone left the shared access door wide open. Of course, the perpetrator was long gone. I still don't know who knocked on my door that night, and I'm not sure I want to know. My New Year's resolution was to stop putting things off, but now I know that good things come to those who wait. To talk about their new key,